A disaster had just struck the overworld, with the majority of the ancient civilization being killed, and most of those who had been able to survive were forced to abandon the city forever. But that being said, there were a few people who wanted to stay inside the city. However, that was a bad idea, as after just a short contact with the skulk, they all became infected with a strange brain-eating disease, which turned most of these once intelligent people into dumb green monsters, known as the zombies. But not all of these zombies were affected at the same level. So that meant while some of them had lost all their brain power and become low intelligent creatures, there were others who had only just become green and were starting to decay, but they had been able to keep most of their brain power. And so this less affected undead group realized that it wouldn't do them any favors to stay in the city, and so they left. And shortly after, they decided to unite and create their own new civilization, as they knew they needed to all stay together in order to stay alive. However, for this new civilization to thrive, they had a number of obstacles to overcome. Mainly that they had to be in water to survive during the day, as they burnt otherwise, which meant that they were all forced to live near the ocean. But that wasn't too bad at first, as they could just stand in the ocean during the day, and then occasionally they could swim under the water to mine resources. And then during the night, they would venture onto the coastline, where they would build small structures that they could eventually live in during the day, rather than just standing in the boring water. And so, once they had done that, the zombies spent most of their time fishing for food and lost treasure. But while it may have seemed like an okay life for the zombies to live, they weren't very happy. After all, they had once been strong massive groups who lived in massive luxurious cities, but now they were divided and they lived in small shacks by the ocean, fishing all day. And so they were desperate to find a cure that would once again allow them to be normal terrestrial creatures. And so it was decided that some of these zombies would be sent out on a voyage across the ocean to try and find a cure for everyone. But for many months, they were sadly unsuccessful. Until one day they came across them, the evokers. Now, the evokers had also been part of the ancient civilization, and luckily for them, they were able to escape the terrible disaster. But there was a slight problem with that. They were actually the cause of the massive destruction, and so they were also indirectly the cause of the zombies' problems. And so obviously the zombies weren't too pleased when they encountered them, and so they began to attack. But the evokers called for a truce, as they knew that they would be far outnumbered by the zombies, and so they were forced to make a deal. The zombies said that they would stop attacking the evokers, but in exchange the evokers would use their magic to cure the zombies. Or they would pretend to. You see, the evokers thought that if the zombies were able to be restored, they would be far too powerful. So instead, the evokers said that their disease was incurable, and that they would never again be land creatures. And so the evokers offered a different solution, and that was to give the zombies a way to become aquatic creatures, and so the first advanced underwater civilization, an idea that they just couldn't resist. And so the evokers, using their dark magic, created a block of concentrated oceanic magic that would give the zombies the abilities to breathe underwater, see better underwater, and overall become very strong aquatic creatures. And that block of the ocean's power was the conduit. Next, the evokers created crystals and shards using the ocean's dormant power. And so the evokers showed these creations to the zombies, and they taught them how to power the conduit using the shards. Now, the zombies were very happy, as it meant that they could live a much better life. But the evokers were also very happy, because now this was one less threat to deal with in the future. And so the zombies set sail home. And when they eventually returned, they showed off the brand new conduit and the amazing powers it granted to the rest of their civilization. And they were very impressed, and as such, they agreed to dive underwater with the power of the conduit and start creating a new town to live in. But there was a slight problem, and that was that in order for the conduit to be powered, a group of zombies had to be standing in a circle around it, holding the shards of the ocean. And well, the zombies didn't want to do that, as it meant that many of them were doing essentially nothing. So they came up with an idea, and that was to infuse these magical shards into cobblestone, and then surround the conduit using that magical cobblestone. And surprisingly, that worked. And that magical cobblestone, by the way, is known today as the prismarine blocks. So, after creating the prismarine, they had many other experiments where they used the shards and the crystals, and they were able to create the sea lanterns. But those weren't very useful, as they could see very clearly underwater with the use of the conduit. But on the bright side, this was another block that they could use in their builds. And so it was at this point everything seemed to be going well, The towns were starting to be constructed, the zombies had a new place to live, and everyone was just very happy. Well, at first they were. You see, while much of the zombie civilization had accepted this new technology and lifestyle, there were many who turned their back to it, as they saw it as a threat to the existence of the overworld. As after all, it was made by the same group that created the skull. So who's to say that something bad couldn't happen with this as well? And so this group resurfaced as they started to create their own new civilization. They started out by creating large boats that could be used during both the day and the night to travel across the oceans. But these boats weren't going to be used for sightseeing the world. As a matter of fact, these boats were going to be used as part of attacks on both underwater towns as well as ordinary villages in an attempt to steal any valuables, as this new civilization was actually groups of pirates. But other than stealing valuables, they had one goal, and that was to destroy the conduit. And so, after a number of weeks preparing, they had their first attempt at stealing the conduit. Except all that planning went to waste, as it was a complete failure, as the zombies were able to fight back very effectively using their tridents, and so the pirates were forced to flee. But that experience made the zombies realize something, and that is that they needed to protect the conduit more than what they currently were, as it was likely that the pirates would try again later, but they would come back much stronger, and so they started to construct massive structures to protect the conduit from future attacks, and these massive structures will be mostly made from the prismarine blocks. Also, the zombies were planning on living there, and they liked their luxurious designs. And so, if you haven't guessed already, these massive structures, well, they were the ocean monuments. Now, the pirates weren't exactly scared of these massive monuments. As a matter of fact, due to these monuments being so massive, it actually made getting in much easier, as it was quite easy to hide in something of that scale. And as such, some of these monuments had their conduits stolen, and as such, many of the zombies inside drowned. Now, seeing this, they realized that they needed to add something more to the monuments in order to protect both the conduits and themselves. And so they did two things. First, they made rooms of sponges inside the monument, so that way if something was to go wrong, there would be a room for them to not drown in. But more importantly, they started to create mechanical protectors to keep the monument safe. Now, these mechanical protectors would have a design based off the very deadly subscribe fish. Based off the very deadly pufferfish, with the idea here being that the potential attackers would see these massive pufferfish and they would run away. But if they didn't run away, they would be attacked with massive lasers that could destroy any incoming ship. Also, these mechanical fish would have an outer casing of prismarine, which would give it extra protection if someone foolishly decided to attack it. And while all these guardians swimming around the monument may sound like enough protection, it wasn't enough in the eyes of the zombies. And so they created a different guardian. This new guardian would be larger, stronger, and have a special ability, being the mining fatigue. But only 3 of these new guardian types would be created per monument. And so, with all these safety features combined, the zombies hoped there would be enough to keep the pirates away and their conduit safe. But they were wrong. You see, when the zombies were programming the guardians, they made it so that it wouldn't attack them. But by that technicality, the pirates also wouldn't be attacked, as they were technically still zombies. And so the pirates used that exploit, and they started to raid monuments, one at a time, stealing every core of every conduit until none were remaining, and all of the intelligent zombies had been killed. Afterwards, these pirates set out on a mission to hide each of these cores throughout the overworld, and once they had done that, they returned to their smaller towns by the coastline, hiding the maps of where these conduit cores were in case they ever needed them in the future. And so, now that the pirates had destroyed the conduit, they felt like they had saved the overworld. But more importantly, they felt like they had saved themselves. But had they really? You see, the evokers had been watching this whole time, waiting to see how the pirates would act. And to their surprise, they had actually succeeded in their impossible mission, which almost scared the evokers, as they were sure that all zombies were too weak to do almost anything. And so the evokers had to act to make sure that the zombie pirates wouldn't gain any more power. And so they sent a curse throughout the entire ocean. And with that curse, all pirate ships were struck down and all the pirates were killed. Well, kind of. You see, the evokers believed that these pirates could have a use in the future, and as such, they were transformed into a mysterious drowned creature. So then, if the evokers ever needed them in the future, they would easily be able to control them. But that part of the curse also applied to regular zombies, and so now if they drowned, they would also be transformed into this strange drowned mob. Also, that's why some drowned hold tridents, the old weapon of the intelligent zombies, or nautilus shells, as some of the zombies had caught the casing to their conduit before they had drowned. And so, at the end of the day, the evokers were the true winners of this conflict. Or were they? As there lived one creature who threatened the evoker's entire existence. Watch this video to find out more.